All right, guys, last bonus video for Module 2 here. And we left off, we're talking about the Samaritan woman at the well. And Jesus has this little diatribe with his disciples, which is where we left off, verse 38. So we're starting at verse 39. We'll see how far we get here and find a good stopping point. But verse 39, Ek de tes paleos ekenes paloi epistusan eis auton ton samariton diaton lagan tes gunaikas martyruses hati apen moi panta ha epoiesa. Okay? And from that city, many believed in him from the Samaritans on account of, remember dia can mean either through or on account of. We determine that by looking at the case of the word that comes after it. Tan lagan is what case? Right, it is an accusative. So it's on the account of. If this was genitive, it would be through. Okay, which really those are close, but just kind of a little bit different shades, and it makes better sense to follow that rule, right? So many Samaritans believed on account of the word of the woman, the one who testified that he said to me all which I did, right? Remember that was her testimony above. Come meet the man who told me all which I ever did, all I ever did, okay? That was her testimony, and many believed in that, okay? Verse 40. Hos un elthon pros auton hoi samaritai, eroton auton menai par autois, kai amenen eke dua hemeras. Okay? Therefore, as they went out to him, as the Samaritans went out to him, they were urging him to remain. Okay? Notice the infinitive there. They encouraged him to remain. We have a complementary infinitive there, completing the idea of the verb before. They're urging him to remain with them, and he remained there 2 days. So did you recognize the infinitive there? Did you recognize how it works? Okay, hopefully. They remained there 2 days. And kai palo pleus epistusan dia ton lagan autu, and many more believed on account of his word, right? So a bunch of people believed because of the testimony of the woman. Many more believe on his word, right? When they hear Jesus for themselves. Verse 42, te gunaiki elegan hati uketi dia tain sain lalian pistumen autoi gar akekaamen kai oidamen hati hutas esten alethos ha soter tu cosmu. And they were saying to the woman, or about the woman, no longer on account of your word do we believe, for we ourselves have heard. Notice akekaamen. Notice the perfect there, right? We got the akeka, right? That reduplication. This one's weird. Akuo is weird. It's not, it doesn't follow exactly the rules that you would expect for perfect, but that double kappa there was always easy for me to remember that was perfect. So, for we ourselves have heard, and we know that this is truly the Savior of the world. Okay. Once again, we have autoi here working as an intensifier. Okay. We saw it before when it was a second person plural. Here we see it as a first person plural. For we ourselves have heard, right? Emphasizing that, like, we heard with our own ears. We didn't need anybody to tell us. We heard with our own ears. We didn't need anybody to tell us. And we know that this is the Savior of the world. All right, continuing on, verse 43. Meta de tas dua hemeras ex elthen akathen eis tain Galilean. And after 2 days, he went out from there into Galilee. 44. Autas gar Jesus martyresen hati prophetes en te idea patridi timain uk ake. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet in his own village. That's not really a word for village, but hometown. And his, patride, you see the word pater in there, in his father's home, that kind of idea. In his father's town, the town where he grew up in. That's kind of an idiom, right? A prophet in his own town does not have timene, honor. Time means honor, right? So the name Timotheos means honors God, right? Timothy means honors God. So timene is honor. A prophet has no honor in his hometown. 45. Ute un eilthen eistain Galileon, edexanta auton hoi Galileoi, panta heorakates, hasa epoiesen, en Ierusalumois, en te heorte kai autu gar eilthon eistain heortain. All right. Therefore, when he went into Galilee, the Galileans, all the Galileans welcomed him, having seen, participle, okay, perfect participle. Notice the cot there, that participle morphemes. Having seen what he did in Jerusalem in the feast, or at the feast, right? So remember, he was in Jerusalem and he did a bunch of miracles there. And on the way back is when he goes through Samaria and spends some time with the Samaritans and teaches them, and tons of them believe. And he keeps going and he goes back to Galilee. And they remember just not too long ago, we saw what you did at the feast, right? So they've got these expectations. For they went into the feast, right? For they were there. They were at the Passover feast and saw what Jesus did, right? So this is kind of the next step of what's going on in the kind of the dramatic unfolding of Jesus's presence and all that kind of stuff, okay? 46. Eilthen un pollen eis tain Cana tain Galileas hapu epoiesen ta hudor oinon. They went therefore again into Cana of Galilee, where he made the water wine. Okay, referring back to chapter 2, where Jesus turned the water into wine. They go back to Cana in Galilee, where he made the water wine. And then it kind of introduces this new story. There's clearly a break here, even though the verses are off. Remember, the verses are added about 1,000 years after this is written. The verses are not inspired. They were not in there originally. And so sometimes we see things like this, where we have half of a sentence or a word not where it should be or whatever. Verses aren't evil. We're not against verses. They help us with reference. But let's just not always assume that at the end of the chapter or at the end of the verse that the thought ends. We always want to keep, continuing and looking at the fuller literary context, or sometimes called the co-text as far as that goes as well, right? Okay. Kai ein tis basilikas, u hahuias, eisthene en Capharnaum. And there was a certain official. Basilikos means official or ruler, okay? Remember we talked before about the different kinds of churches within the Catholic tradition. There's a local parish church, and then there's a cathedral, which comes from the word kathemi, cathedra in Latin, which refers to the chair the Pope sits in. And then the highest is a basilica, a ruling church, an official's church, right? And that has to have some sort of a relic. It has to be declared a basilica by a pope, okay? So if there's a basilica in your hometown, there's some sort of reason. It was declared at some point. I'm sure there's a story about that if you ask around. So, and there was a certain there's a certain ruler. There was a certain ruler whose son was sick in Capernaum. Okay, so in Capernaum, there's a ruler who has a sick kid. Verse 47. Hutas akusas hati Iesus eke ektes Iudaias eis tein Galilean ap elthen prosauton kai erota hina katabe kai iasetai autu tan huian emelen gar apothneskein. He, hearing that Jesus came from Judea into Galilee, went forth to him and urged him or questioned him in order that he might go up and heal his son. For he was about to die. Notice the infinitive here, completing the idea of for he was about. Imperfect, he remained about to die. Okay, that's a pretty serious sickness. This Basilikos, this leader, this ruler, is concerned about that. He's about to die. Okay, we haven't encountered any me verbs yet, by the way. I know that's the topic for this week. A lot of times they show up, ditto me specifically, but we haven't encountered any yet. 48. Epen un ha Iesus pros auton, ean me semea kai terata edete, u me pistu sete. Okay, Jesus said to him, unless a signs and wonders you see, you will not believe. Okay, so Jesus may be kind of frustrated at the hometown nature here, the no honor after all that he did, that the prophet gets no honor in his hometown. At least that's kind of the assumption here, even though they welcomed him gladly. But of course, we learn in other gospels and other places that there's a struggle there. They don't really receive him. They just want him to do magic tricks all the time. They don't respect him for who he is, presumably. 49. Lege pros auton ha Basilikos curie katabethi prin apethanain ta paidion mu. The leader said to him, Lord, notice the vocative here again, sir, good master, that sort of thing, right? A lot of respect there. Sir, come down before my child dies. Notice the infinitive again. There's no about to here, but that's kind of the idea. Come down before my child dies. Verse 50, Lege auto ha Iesus porou ha huias su ze, epistusen ha anthropos to lago, han apen auto ha Iesus kai eprueta. Okay? Jesus said to him, go. See the imperative there? Jesus said to him, go. That's his command. Your son is alive. Okay? Your son is living, is alive. Epistusen ha anthropos. The man believed in the word which he said, which Jesus said to him, and he went. Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and leave that there. The story continues a little bit longer, and you can find out, they do some investigation and found at the time that the kid gets well, and they kind of trace it back to the exact same time that Jesus said that. Spoiler alert, but you can read ahead on that. Again, we didn't encounter any me verbs as I was hoping to, but you'll see those as they come along. Spend some time reading, translating, and we'll see you again soon, friends. God bless.